Yeah, got home, and then the next morning he said, "Oh, Mum, he was in the bathroom. He goes, I'm really struggling to breathe." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, just take shallow breaths." I go, "No, I'm going to take a deep breath." So he took this deep breath in and then just passed out.
Oh my God.
So I rang the doctor, and he said, "Get him in here straight away." Scanned him, and he had a 9-centimetre blood clot forming in his vena cava. If he was fit enough, he would train. And they would keep an eye on all his bloods. And so if everything was low, platelets, neutrophils, everything like that, they'd go, "Right, no contact sport for you, Dylan.
Yeah.
Right, you can do the drills, no problem, but you're not involved in the game." I think what endeared them to the club a lot was, here's this kid fighting for his life, and all he wanted to do was play football.
Hello and welcome to the Thrive Against Cancer podcast, where we give a voice to the cancer community. My name is Toby Freeman, founder and CEO of the Robin Cancer Trust, cancer advocate and your host. Every episode we will be hosting open and honest conversations with people affected by cancer, whether personally, as a family member, clinician, or charities and organisations. We will be talking to the cancer community about the cancer community and all the things that are important to you. Our guest today is mother of promising West Ham and Australian footballer Dylan Tombides, who passed away after a 3-year battle with testicular cancer. She now works tirelessly to raise awareness and educate males about testicular cancer after founding the DT38 Foundation. Our guest today is Tracy Tombides. Tracy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Toby.
I'm really excited about today, as I am with all our guests, but you're here in person, and I feel like a lot of your story is going to resonate really, really deeply with me and my family. I think there's a lot of intertwining factors and a lot of intertwining characters. But I really want to just pass the floor over to you because I'm really excited to get into this and hear your perspective and your experience. So the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, Dylan and his brother Taylor were born in Australia, in Perth, and probably spent the first 10, 11 years of their life there. So, Australia, wonderful place to outdoor living, outdoor lifestyle. So they always play sport. And, their main sport from a very young age was football. We'd always, my husband and I, always wanted to make sure that one of us was home as they were growing up. And I had a very good job. So he was the stay-at-home dad and the reason that a ball was at their feet at such an early age. So it wasn't, just before Taylor and Dylan were born, I had another young child that passed away shortly after he was born. And the reason I'm introducing that into the conversation is because I feel that has helped me deal with the loss of Dylan, because I knew at the time there was something really significant that resonated after losing Jordan, and it was a story that I read in the newspaper, and it was about a man that had battled with his wife with cancer, and she passed away. But it gave him the tools to deal with his daughter's cancer that she was going through. And I just, I often wondered why that story just stuck with me.
Yeah. And
when Dylan was diagnosed, that's when it hit home. It was that, now I realise I've lost one child. I'll be fine. I got over that one. I'll be fine. That was the
tools.
I've got the tools to get me through whatever is thrown at me. And and so that's the reason I sort of raise it. So, we took Dylan and Taylor up to Macau to live with my work. That's where my next stop was. I lived there for about 4 years. But in that time, Dylan and Taylor came for a couple of years. They travel every weekend over to Hong Kong to play football Friday night, to train, to play in a local competition for their own age. Because every other day on Macau, on the island, they were playing against men. And, sometimes 50-year-old men in cages. And it was really I think it really gave Dylan his renewed his appetite for the game. So it was while we were in Macau that we had the opportunity to take Dylan over to Portugal for some trials over there, because one of the things that Macau is, it was a huge Portuguese colony.
Right.
So, everybody knew everything about Portugal. And so we had some trials lined up. But in the meantime, I'd gone back to Perth, and one of the West Ham scouts that had been following Dylan's career was in Perth. And he said to me, can you come to West Ham before you go to Portugal? Because we're going to be up there in August. I said, yeah, sure. So we went to West Ham.
Amazing.
And never looked back.
That's incredible, isn't it?
No, it is. It's wonderful. And so, I had the opportunity to move with my work up to London. So once we settled, took the opportunity. Dylan joined West Ham and Taylor joined probably about 12 months later. They didn't realise at the time that Taylor had a brother. But as soon as they did, they wanted to get him into the mix as well. So
what ages are we talking?
We're talking 14 and 12. Yeah.
Wow, that's a big thing to just move country straight over to England at that age. And West Ham, big club as well.
Big club, yes. Very big club and wonderful. And you're right. I was actually, when we went up to live in Macau, one of the things I didn't want to do was put them in a international school. I wanted to immerse them in the culture that was, the Macanese people, and it was a real big education for them. They learnt Mandarin, they learnt Portuguese. I say that they didn't learn it fluently. They learnt the swear words that every person learns first. But in my workplace, I was speaking mostly Cantonese. So we'd get home. We couldn't practice any of these languages with each other. So we just reverted to English, But it would have been, it would have been great if I was talking in Mandarin or they were learning Cantonese in the school. It would have been fantastic, but it didn't work out that way. So no, it was a wonderful time there. It was like living in Australia and maybe even living in the UK 30 years ago, when you didn't have to lock your doors. You didn't have to worry about, any crime. There was crime over there, but it was organised. It wasn't on the streets. It didn't come anywhere near us Westerners, or Guilos as they used to call us, foreigners, and they kept right away from us. So, the boys could walk the streets with safety to and from school. Yeah, it was just a really nice environment. But yeah, it was an interesting one as well. They would come home at lunchtime and talk about how half the class was still asleep, like literally sleeping on the tables while the class was going on, because it was just no one really functioned before 10, 11 o'clock because it was so hot over there. You'd stay awake. You'd sleep till late and stay up till like 10, 11 o'clock. Training football, playing football. Yeah. It was just, moved back to accommodate the heat. So,
then you came over to England.
Then we came to England.
East London. Yeah,
that was a shock. And then the weather hit us. No, but I'm thinking of the trial that Dylan had. When he came up here, it was school holidays, and so he had to trial as a 14-year-old with the under-18s, and Tony Carr really liked what he was about, loved how technical he was, loved how raw he was, I think. And and so he said, look, could you stay another couple of weeks? Because we had other trials lined up. We had Man United next, and I think then we had Blackburn Rovers.
Wow.
And we said, yeah, of course we can. So he then trialled with his own age group, and they said, as soon as you move to London, we'll get settled, we'll offer you something. So, yeah.
Incredible. So that's where the West Ham journey begins.
Yeah.
And obviously you had great success at West Ham.
Yeah.
And you're all over here. Is this the whole family's over here?
Well, at this point, the whole family's here. Yes, we're all over here. I'm working in the industry that I love, and Jim was staying home with the boys, to and from school. It absolutely floored me to see how dark it got at 3:30 in the afternoon. You go to pick the kids up from school and it's dark. It was a real shock. Especially I remember Taylor one time deciding that we weren't where we were meant to be at 3:30, so he decided to go walking looking for us. Well, that just I wasn't in the country at the time, and so it was a bit of a panic, and Yeah, but no, it was a wonderful introduction to football over here, because Dylan thrived. He loved it. He had a brilliant team. He had some England international players in his squad. Yeah, and he thrived. So much so that when he just before his 17th birthday, he got a phone call to say, we want you to join the first team in Portugal. We're going away on an end of season trip.
That's amazing.
Or
isn't it?
break at one of the breaks, and so he joined him over there. Had his 17th birthday over there. I spoke to him. He was a few flaming sambucas under, and these gentlemen that were supposed to be looking after him, they're going, "Don't worry, Trace, we got his back." Yes.
Don't look up who was in the squad.
I haven't seen them.
Year.
Don't look up. Don't look up. Yeah, but he had a wonderful time, and it was on. That's why he was on such a high. And then within that month, he's finding a lump on his testicle, and not saying anything initially, and not wanting to go down to the club because they were in a relegation battle. And he said he wanted them to focus on football, not anything else. So we went to the doctor. And I didn't go in with him because as a 17-year-old, you don't need your mum. And the doctor examined him and said, "Oh, it's just a cyst, don't worry. People live with cysts all the time."
So no further investigation?
No further investigation. And not knowing anything about the testicular cancer or any of those signs and symptoms, I was really relieved to get that diagnosis. I didn't think for 1 minute, I need a second opinion. It's not good.
No, because the doctors told you.
The doctors told me.
Answer. Yeah.
And so, we went on back playing, and Dylan was on the bench at the last game of the season. Didn't come on, unfortunately, but you couldn't wipe the smile off his face. And that was like the 26th of May, and then I think the following week he flew out to Australia to join up with his Australian teammates for the Under-17 World Cup.
Wow. And what year is this? Sorry, just
this is 2011.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from my perspective as well, not any information out there. Similar year.
Yeah.
Well, same year as Rob as well.
Yeah.
There was just not anything out there, and you do listen to your doctor. So I think he did amazing telling you as well. So did Dylan come to you and say, "I found a lump, I need to go to the doctors"?
Yes. No, he did. And, at the time, I said to him, "Why don't you see the doctors at West Ham?" And he said, "Oh, I don't want it. They've got enough on their plate." And I said, "Okay, as far as I was aware, a doctor would be fine wherever we went, whichever direction we went."
Yeah.
So it was while he was in Mexico that he, I think it was his fourth or fifth game in, that he was pulled for a random drug test. And it came back positive for either a banned substance or a tumour. So I get this phone call on Tuesday, the 5th of July, 2011, from Cancun. They couldn't get a direct flight back, so they said, "Oh, where should we go?" I said, "Well, go to Can Cozumel, places that I worked in." I said, "Wonderful, wonderful spot. Go rest there. Go enjoy." Spoke to them every day. Never stopped laughing. On such a high. And this day he said, "Mum, I had a missed call from the Australian doctor, so it went to voicemail. I thought I'd better answer it." And he said, "Oh, you need to call me straight away." And he said, "Mum, my drug test came back negative, and I haven't taken anything, so I must have a tumour."
God, that's scary.
Yeah, and it was just, it broke my heart because not only am I getting news, but I wanted to be his tower of strength. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't be. I couldn't be there. Yeah. And I know that I got off the phone. I said, "Don't worry, leave it with me. I'll get in touch with West Ham. By the time you land, everything will be sorted." That was my way of reassuring him. But I burst into tears. Yeah, it's just the sheer size of the unknown at that point, and the fact that it's now been 3 months. Yeah. And not knowing enough about testicular cancer to know just how deadly that 3 months can be. A case of ringing the doctor, saying Dylan lands on Thursday. They arranged for him to be seen on Friday, wanted him to settle down from jet lag over the weekend. Monday, had your testicle removed. By the weekend, they'd started chemo. So, yeah, I'm so grateful. West Ham, I had the best of everything available to me that we needed. So, yeah, we even went and, we ended up at Bart's and went for a second opinion privately, and they said, where you are, you've got the best help you can have.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, great, and like Dylan said recently in the documentary, I thought that this would be, just a little bump in the road for me, have chemo, get it over and done with, and then get back playing. And, his first 4 rounds of chemo were the BEP. And what happened was they decided not to give him bleomycin because it scars the lungs.
Yes. So he's an athlete, obviously.
As an athlete,
full lung
wanting
capacity.
to, exactly. So so they decided to do, not to give him that part of it. Had his hearing test, stored his sperm, woke up that morning going, yeah, I'm off to have sex with a cup. Does anybody want to, who's taking me? This sort of, he was just such a, upbeat person. And when you see him upbeat, you think, oh, good, he's winning this fight.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And I say to people that the only person in our family really that had the right to stay curled up in bed was Dylan, and he didn't do it. So I made sure that I never did it. Not even after he passed did I make sure I never did it. And I think that's the way I want him to remember me, or to look down on me, as seeing his qualities. But yeah, so we went in, and one of the things was that his markers came down after the first session. So by the time he had the second session, they decided not to give him a CAT scan because his markers and everything were responding. And being an athlete, they didn't want to put him through that. So then he went on to have 3 and 4, and once again, everything looked great. I was out playing golf with him one day, and he was really erratic, not like him at all. He's one of these boys that, everything you touch, he's got the right technique with it. He just, his hand-eye coordination was brilliant.
Like my brother. That was always very annoying as a younger brother. Yeah.
Well, I say that he got all those skills from me.
Nice.
So, so I'm quite proud. But he... got home, and then the next morning he said, "Oh, Mum, he was in the bathroom. And he goes, I'm really struggling to breathe." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, just take shallow breaths." I go, "No, I'm going to take a deep breath." So he took this deep breath in and then just passed out.
Oh my God.
So I rang the doctor, and he said, "Get him in here straight away." Scanned him, and he had a 9-centimetre blood clot forming in his vena cava. And had they scanned him in between 2 and 3, they would have found it. And not that I can't even begin for 1 minute to assign blame to anybody, because at all times they had Dylan's best interest in what they were doing. But yeah, he spent the next 10 days in hospital on blood thinning medication and then what happened was the clot was shrinking, but his markers were going up. So they didn't know whether this was the blood clot that had formed around a cancerous cell, and it was the old cancer, or whether it was new cancer forming. They didn't know. And so they decided to approach it as new cancer. So they did away with BEP, tried the next drug, and go from there. So yeah, it was really a battle for him. West Ham were like, whatever you need. And Dylan's like, I can't eat the hospital food. It's being an athlete, being, having veggies, having, he said, I don't want all the sugar that's any West Ham arranged for a nutrition to feed him, which went down like a lead balloon. I can tell you that. He set up his hospital room with his putting as a putting green. So he's,
incredible,
practicing his putting. I took a blow-up mattress in because he never spent a night in hospital without me, not for the whole 3 years. And so I had a blow-up mattress. So he would swap between the hospital bed sometimes and the blow-up mattress. He just slept wherever he... So I can think they were like, this young man is really like challenging our... challenging our our SOPs, all of our things that we normally do with our patients. Yeah, I think he put a sign on the door: "Do not wake me for breakfast." He was just somebody that knew what he wanted, and
that's so empowering, isn't it? Because so much of cancer treatment is out of your control.
Yeah,
sounds like you as a family and Dylan leading this took real control of what he could, and that's an incredible thing.
And I think that is helped a lot too by not only was I always by his bedside, but whenever he had doctor's appointments, he had the West Ham doctor and the West Ham physio there as well. So I suppose it felt like the doctor just wasn't dealing with a cancer patient. He was like answering to other professionals as well.
Yeah.
And so, I was really comforted in that because, like I said, there were times when you become overwhelmed and you don't always have the questions at the time to ask. So you've got Doc Wheeler and you've got John, who was the Dylan's physio, asking questions. And when I get in those environments, I'm as much as I want to be a strong woman, I'm a wuss. I can't handle bad news, or I just pass out. So Dylan would go sit in the chair and I would go lay on the bed in anticipation. If they said that things weren't good for Dylan, I'd slowly, blood pressure would lower and I would give Tracy, I'd be laying down so no one had to pick me up off the floor, pretty much.
Yeah.
I even did it with my dog when he got told he needed surgery, and I'm laying there talking to the vet on the floor, with my feet up. So I'm a real wuss when it comes to stuff like that. But so even to the next cycle of chemotherapy for Dylan was as an outpatient. And sorry, no, it wasn't. It was the third lot was an outpatient. And at that particular time, he was like, I'm having it on Friday afternoon. I'll recover Saturday, Sunday, so I can train Monday through to Friday. And 100%, he didn't want anyone to refer to him as a cancer patient. He made it clear to the medical team at West Ham, I'm not a patient. I'm an athlete.
He held that identity.
It was really, really important for him. He said, Doc Wheeler told me, he said, I called Dylan my patient one time and I will never make that mistake again. But he was such a really genuine person that you couldn't help fall in love with. I obviously as a mum sit here and I hear all the stories now of people that I connect with, and they tell me the stories, and he got pulled aside one time saying, Dylan, your humour is off the charts and you are able to back it up with your football. But some of your teammates are trying too hard with the humour and it's letting their football down. So during training, can we dial it in a bit? And he went, yeah, no worries. But he just was, and if he was fit enough, he would train. And they would keep an eye on all his bloods. And so if everything was low, platelets, neutrophils, everything like that, they'd go, right, no contact sport for you, Dylan. Yeah. Right, you can do the drills, no problem, but you're not involved in the game. And it's fine. He'd go off out of the game and he'd go shoot, or he'd go do something on his own. And they were amazed. They said, I think what endeared them to the club a lot was, here's this kid fighting for his life and all he wanted to do was play football. He was in the rehab room. Yeah. He was getting his fitness, and then you've got the people on the injured list, not given the same sort of attention to their recovery and their rehabilitation. And they were he just was showing people up. And even to the point where, they all wear their GPS monitors, and that the physio said to me, Trace, Dylan's did fantastic today. He's really putting a lot of pressure on the boys that have nothing wrong with them, that have no excuse. His output is greater than theirs. His recovery is less, but his output is greater than theirs. And so he thrived being able to keep doing what he loved.
It's routine, isn't it? It's routine and some normality. Yeah. And I imagine for him, every time he steps on the field, he can see that end goal of where he wants to be as well. Yeah. Like he's like, I'm carrying on because I want to get through this, and then I can just carry on my dream. Yeah. Rather than pausing the dream and then trying to catch up to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we sat and discussed it one time, and I said, look, you'll be a cancer patient for a short time. So think about how you want to be perceived. And he said, well, I want to be perceived as an athlete. A professional athlete. I said, then go be one while you're undergoing all of this.
Yeah.
And and he did. He was He was brilliant throughout it all.
It's incredible because the amount of people we hear talking about being a cancer patient is so all-encompassing.
Yeah.
And actually that's a major part for people. Like I've become a cancer patient. I've been labelled by a cancer patient.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously you guys worked really hard. That was a hard no. So
that was definitely a hard no. And even to the point where WADA, the World Anti-Doping Authority, got involved. And they turned around and said that they wanted Dylan to renounce his professional contract while he was undergoing this treatment. And Dylan said, absolutely not. He said, if you want to test me for a drug, do you want to do a drug test? Sorry, if you want to do a drug test on me, and if I fail, you want to take me to court, you go ahead.
So did they, just for clarity there, did they think he was on performance-enhancing drugs or just...
No, just they knew he was on drugs.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And they didn't know what capabilities they had. No one, I really think they missed the boat. They should have been drug testing him on a weekly basis, purely just for information, just to find out, what his markers and what he was giving off while he was going through these chemotherapy drugs. And they at one point said, we want you to fill out a therapeutic use exemption form. Right? Which states what drugs you're on, and you get signed off, which allows you to continue playing. So we tried to, at Bart's, get them to fill in what the chemotherapy drugs contained. They couldn't give us that information. They had no idea the percentages of what was in these drugs to fill in this form, and they couldn't do it.
Was he on a clinical trial or
Nope.
No,
okay. He wasn't on clinical trials, and so in the end, Dylan just said, if I'm not renouncing my professional. If you want to come and drug test me, fine. We'll deal with that battle. And it led Dylan and the medical Doc Wheeler to producing this medical for the British Medical Journal about drugs for life, not performance enhancing sort of thing. So they did this. This document in piece, and it sits there in the medical journal. And I know that Doc Wheeler keeps using this for, just for turning around and saying, right, we do urine tests for players all the time. What happens with the results?
Yeah.
Is anyone following up with these results, because they could be life-threatening? And so that was the direction that paper took. But yeah, he was so determined. And, there's only one time I ever saw him absolutely break down. Inconsolable he was. And that was around March. He had 2 lots of stem cell treatments in December 2012. So he had the 2 lots of them and come out of them, and it went really well, which it always did for the first 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then in March he got told that there was that his cancer had gone to his liver, and that he needed to have his liver resected, and he'd be out for 3 months. And he was building at that point to the Under-20 World Cup in June, July, and the thought of him not being able to do that he was inconsolable. I think he cried all the way home, and I'm driving crying. I'm listening to my son, in tears. And, it was the saddest day of his life.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
It's just that horrible roller coaster, isn't it? The hope, the dreams, that something else has happened. Yeah. You said he had 2 stem cell. Were they transplants? Sorry, 2.
Yes.
Was someone in the family a match?
No, sorry, they weren't stem cell transplants. They took his own.
They harvested his own.
They harvested his own stem cells and did that with him twice.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of that roller coaster, isn't it? Like say, it's working. Oh, it's not working.
Yeah, it's not working. Come back, and then he had his liver resected, and then probably a few weeks, they would do the ablation. They find a spot when they do the scan next, and so they found a spot, so they just would go in and do the ablation on that spot, and that was, that just seemed to be like a regular pattern for 2 or 3 weeks, and then it just wasn't going away. So in November they turn around. This is November 2013 now. They said, we want to give you another dose of chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So this is by now his 7th or 8th regime of chemo. So he had that, finished that in beginning of December. He had World Cup qualifiers in January. He got himself fit to play.
Yeah.
And, once again, I just did a webinar with his teammates and they talk about just how strong he was, how mentally strong he was. You're playing in Oman, it's hot as well.
Mm-hmm.
He said they were, they're inspired every day when they think about, which is a lovely thing.
Yes.
It is really lovely. But yeah, it was only when he came back from that tournament that the doctors here said, sorry, Dylan, we can no longer offer you a cure.
That is just going from that high of training and being there and then coming back, because you must have felt so fit as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you look at photos of him and this particular photo of him playing in Oman in January, I showed the doctors because so the next step after they turned around and said we could no longer offer cure, West Ham said, right, wherever you want to go, wherever you want to do, if you want to go over to the Mayo Clinic or if you want to go, we didn't know what we wanted to do.
Yeah. You don't really think out of national healthcare either at that point, because private healthcare was thing, but it's not as much as it was now. It's like, well, if there's nothing on healthcare, surely what do we do? But
exactly. And we'd gone to private, and the private people said you're in the best care with the national. So we ended up going to Germany, and I showed them this photograph of Dylan. I said, this is Dylan. And he said, oh, is that 3 years ago? I said, no, that's 3 weeks ago. And they were blown away just how physically fit he was.
Because when you think of chemo, you have an idea. Yeah. I know what my brother went through.
Yeah.
When I hear chemo, I go, Rob was the pre-chemo, post-chemo.
Yeah.
There's
a world of difference. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hair loss, there's all of that, and muscle loss, especially all of that. So
no, for sure. And Dylan had no hair in this photo, but his muscle mass was really evident to see. And there was at one point he lost 24 kilos, initially, but that was the work that he did at the training ground, and the physios and the strength and conditioning coaches all working on him and giving him a reason to, keep pushing forward to be a professional athlete. So, so we went out to Germany. They offered alternative treatment with low dose chemotherapy. Once again, I suppose at this particular point, I want to pop up and say, I changed jobs in between Dylan's treatment. It's still in the same industry, but I couldn't thank both employers enough. They allowed me to be with him every day that he was in hospital. I was away from work.
Yes.
When he wasn't at hospital and he was home, Jim looked after him, and I came to work. And I'm so grateful that they allowed me to be a mother.
Yes.
At that particular time.
Important.
Yeah, it was a big difference to Dylan as well. Yeah. He didn't want to go through this on his own. He didn't, so I wouldn't have let him go through it. It's one of those moments where you go, no, my job's nowhere near as important as, being here.
But that support is so, so invaluable.
Yeah.
Can I ask how Dylan took the news when it was, all of you, I suppose, but how was Dylan once he was told there's nothing more we can do here in the UK?
He certainly wasn't anywhere near as upset as what he was from, the world not being able to go to the World Cup. But it was news, I suppose, that I had a bit of control over. I was like, don't worry, Dylan, there's other alternative treatments out there. UK only have so much, you say all the positive things. And at that time, I still believed him. I genuinely thought that Dylan was this amazing young man that had a message for the world some way or another. And because he had this cancer, I'd worked up in my head that he was going to be giving the message that chemotherapy wasn't the be-all to end-all. Right? And they was going to find some alternative method of treating his cancer.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought that he would be. So I was like, right, well, we can go to America or we can go to Germany. We probably had this discussion more with my husband and I at the time, was discussing where we wanted to go.
Yeah.
More so than Dylan's input. I know that he didn't want to. He didn't want a lot of people around him while he looked so sickly. Anyhow, we decided Germany. We thought there was treatment places out there, and so we took him out to Germany. And what that looked like was out there for a week, home for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Out there for a week, home for 3 weeks. And so the first one we went out there, we sat down and he said, look, there's some things that have gone wrong with his medical treatment. And at the time I probably took that with a pinch of salt, because I would have thought most doctors would do something different, and so maybe not, not pointing fingers. And like I said once before, I don't point a finger. Even at the misdiagnosis, I don't point a finger. So the first week out there was really promising. We come home full of energy, down at training. He had a treatment over there, which I can't remember the actual terminology for it, but it's where they actually inject chemotherapy into your liver.
Okay.
And because the liver's got two entrance, two exits, they block one off, and it allows the chemotherapy to remain in the liver longer.
Okay.
So they did that with the first one and had really good results. And because Dylan's strong and everything like that, so they give him a second one, and we first hear that everything was going well, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And Dylan was not well at all, and it was like 2 weeks for him to go from being this really, things were working, to him being in a coma.
Oh my God. Is he in Germany at this point?
This is in Germany, yeah. And so, I don't know what happened out there. I don't know what the last part. I resigned myself to the fact that it would serve no purpose for me to find out that it was malpractice or anything like that. Assigning blame would not help me get through the rest of my journey.
Yeah.
So it was, I honestly, still to that day while he was in a coma, I thought, oh, he's resting so his body can focus all on that and he'll be out of his coma in no time. I just did not for 1 minute believe it. And it was even when they had one of the doctors there that was a Chinese doctor, and he said to me, you need to understand your child is dying. And with my history of collapsing with bad news, that's where I went. I woke up with all these doctors around me, like bringing me to, it was just, it's brutal. But, his bedside manner was terrible. But he wasn't telling me anything that wasn't factual. It's just I couldn't cope with it. I just didn't want to believe it. And, And so, West Ham brought him back to London. We came back straight after the next day. We didn't know what else to do. We ended up coming back to West Ham at a game on the Saturday. Dylan passed away on April the 18th, which was Good Friday. So on the Saturday the 19th, they said, could you come to the game? And we said, just tell us what you want us to do. They wanted to retire his shirt. They wanted to, they wanted his memory and his legacy to be, be there forever. And so Jim and Taylor walked his shirt out to the centre circle, and they have just been absolutely amazing ever since. They arranged for Dylan to be flown out to Australia for where his service was. And it was really out there that seeing all his family and friends, none of them knew what Dylan went through. None of them knew the signs and symptoms of testicular cancer. And it was at that moment where I went, that's what I'm going to do in Dylan's memory. I'm going to make sure I educate the young men in our lives about, and the women, us mums, if I'd have been told it, when Dylan was born, like you have your clinical nurses and stuff like that come around and check, I said, if I'd been told that as a boy, this is what will affect, younger kids, and to be aware of it, then I may have approached it with a second opinion or wanting something. But I didn't know anything about it. And so, it really made me hone in on what I wanted to do in his memory, for sure.
Yeah, and what an incredible thing to do. Sorry, that was such a powerful story to take in a moment. Like, I think to be able to come out of that and think I want to put some good back into the world, and create this legacy for Dylan and for everyone else, and the fact that West Ham supported you so much, and I know you've been very closely linked with them, haven't you, throughout this whole journey and since. It's just an amazing thing to do. How did you channel that grief that you were feeling? And you said earlier, obviously, you'd lost. Sorry, did you say Jordan?
Jordan. Yeah.
Those tools that you had, going through again that tragedy. How did that shape how you went through that grief, and then how you started to formulate the DT38 Foundation?
Yeah. Well, one of the things while Dylan was going through it, I looked up to the sky and went, "You've taken one son. Surely you're not going to take another." Right? I realised never to do that again, never give him an ultimatum or something like that, because I've got no control over that side of things. But one of the things I did shortly after Dylan passed away, while I was still in Perth, was I'm very spiritual, and I love the thought of connecting with people that have passed, and I did that with Dylan. And one of the things that Dylan told me was, he told me two powerful things, actually. He said to me, "Mum, please don't go down the malpractice route. It'll take such a long time and you'll be miserable for such a long time. Please don't do that." Mm-hmm. So that was a reason I didn't pursue that. But he also said to me was, "Mum, I wasn't long for this world. And if I didn't go when I did, I would have gone soon after." And that, for me, was the moment where I went, it wouldn't have mattered what I did. It wouldn't have mattered if I had everything at my disposal, which I pretty much did with West Ham's help. There was nothing that was going to stop him from passing on and passing over. And it just gave me a sense of, I lost that sense of helplessness, if you know what I mean. Lost that sense of, right, that was your path, that was your journey. You've put testicular cancer on the map. Now it's my job to go out and deliver on your purpose. So, and I think, obviously, people that have gone through grief see that as me being amazingly strong, but I'm actually adopting characteristics that Dylan showed me while he was going through it. And don't get me wrong, there's been days where I'll listen to a song or I'll burst into tears, or, I sat down, I was watching a program, and funny enough, it was about chemotherapy, and it was about the drugs being diluted and not working and people dying and insurance company. It was like a scam thing. And I literally felt Dylan sitting beside me, and it was just such a warm moment. And so I experience those things quite often. I'm alert to them. As you know, Dylan passing away on April the 18th last week. Yeah. Taylor is in Canada, and always concerned about him because he took Dylan's passing really hard, and at one point didn't want to be here, and at one point tried to take his life. And at that particular time, so me not being around him was a real concern for me. But I got a lovely message, and he said, "Mum, this is my Uber driver," and it was ODT387.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just knew Dylan was looking after him and was going to get him home safe, and he knew that, because I'd sort of like drilled into him, things like I've just, I turned around and said to him, "Taylor, you've got to take the positives out of everything." And he was like, "Well, how do I take the positive out of Dylan dying?" I said, "Taylor, do you know how many people pass away do you know how many people get to be with their loved ones when that's actually happening? You know, we were there. He was having medical care. He was being treated. He was surrounded by you, Jim and I. You know, like I said, I rattled off a couple of examples, and I said, I'm so grateful that I had this. And Dylan, this is the positive you take, that you were there for your brother when he passed away. And so I'm very much somebody that tries to find that positiveness out of any situation. We punched on a couple of times because he was like, this is a load of rubbish. But he's starting to come round now when things like his Uber driver rocks up and he goes, that can't be a coincidence, you know. And so, but that's what's helped me deal with this. And yes, yes, I have actually had days where I don't lock myself down, but I do what I want to do. Like I've watched probably 3 or 4 movies since Dylan's passed away, at least 30 times each, because I'll watch his favourite movies on his birthday. Yeah. I'll watch his favourite movies on his anniversary of his passing. And if 18th of April doesn't fall on Good Friday, then I'll watch it on Good Friday and the 18th of April. So here I am watching Shooter 30 times, Madagascar 3.
What a good movie.
Madagascar 3, Law Abiding Citizen, they're the 3 go-to movies. And
Taste.
And it's just it's not me. I'm not down, I'm not miserable. It's just me going, no, this is what I want to do right now. Yeah. This is me just taking that moment to reflect and connect, and
taking some space for yourself, isn't it? Like, and it's an acknowledgement, and crikey, that's certainly a healthier coping mechanism. That there's a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I know that my then husband and I, we grieved on totally different planes.
Family dynamics around grieving are really difficult.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that it was the reason we broke up, but it's a significant reason why we're not together anymore. And once again, I'm okay with that, because I feel like the journey that I'm going on, I need somebody else to take me on that journey, and that Jim's got his own journey to finish off on. So I'm not even upset that I'm not married anymore. I just feel that, there's something more purposeful for me, and I'm hoping I'm on that road to finding out what it is, and I do believe it's around what I'm doing. So I'm just keep knocking on the door and making all these boys check their testicles on a regular basis. So, and of course, I get a kick out of seeing the guys squirm, and like cross their legs or something like that. I get a bit of amusement out of that.
Absolutely, yeah. That's So, should we talk about that purpose? Yeah. I'd love to dive into that. So, how did the idea for the charity? Where was that? That was born in Australia. But there's a lot of practicalities that go into, you had that moment, you're like, I want to do this. But there's a lot of practicalities in setting that up. And, let's talk about the work that you've been doing and what you want to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. Originally, I knew that when Dylan passed, I had about probably 4 or 5 weeks. We didn't take Dylan out to Australia until probably, just under 3 weeks later. And in that particular time, I was like, I want to do something in his memory. It's not every day that a kid from Perth, Australia gets to come over to West Ham. Do I create that sporting link, giving opportunities? And then, there's quite a few people that do that already and that have more history and more, qualifications than I do, especially if I'm the one that's going to be driving it, a female doing it. It was not something that I thought. And once again, so I was toying with other things, other ideas of how I could keep Dylan's memory and do things in his memory. So it wasn't until I went home to Australia that it was that light bulb moment that it was going to be that.
And that was the revelation that no one knew about this. Yeah. Young guys didn't know about this, and
all these. I had. The people that were at his mates and that at the wake, it's at some point during the 3 years that Dylan was going through this, they'd come and stayed at our house. So, and even then they didn't know. Even then they didn't have, what are your signs and symptoms, Dylan? What are you going through, Dylan? Tell me what you found. There wasn't that communication, and, and they're best friends.
Yes.
So, it was a really, like when he said, we don't know, I was like, how don't you know? You've been talking to Dylan over the years. How don't you know?
I can assure you guys just don't talk about this stuff. Yeah.
So
everything but, I think.
Everything
most of the
but.
time. Yeah.
So that, it was. It was, to me, it just became a really easy decision, a natural thing for me to do. And, as you would know yourself, you learn all about your own type of the cancer. As Dylan's was non-seminoma, so I knew as much as I did about that.
Yeah.
So it was up to me to learn a bit more about the others as well. Yeah.
And then focus on education.
Yep.
So age bracket, obviously 15-45 for testicular cancer, most common, can happen any age. You decided on education, and that was an awareness. So how did that come about with West Ham? Did they really want to support this? Because you were quite closely linked with the club for many, many years. And obviously you still have good ties there.
Yeah.
Did it start with like academy talks and things like that?
Well, it first started off with the West Ham United Foundation. They were working in the schools as part of their community outreach programs, and they decided to take the education program, which was linked to Key Stage 1 and 2 of the national curriculum, into the primary schools. And it was more just to engage with the kids, get them to learn about Didge the character, because Didge, the book was written about Dylan's like true life, but in a way that children would understand. But it was the story in the back of the book for the parents that was it was me talking. So that's what the parents would read. The kids would learn it. They would, take a book home and say, this is what we learned today. Parents straight away would become aware of testicular cancer. But West Ham United Foundation were delivering it because they were also including, 30 minutes of sport activity and that from as part of their requirements in the community. So it worked really, really well until that COVID, came along and shut everything down, sort of thing. So that was the reason the education book came about, was from people back in Perth, in WA. They were the ones that put a book together and said, here you go, would you like to use this? And I said, yes, thank you, I would love to use it. So they all his mates decided to choose a character they wanted to be in, there's roosters, there's elephants, and Dylan was the proud lion, Taylor was a kangaroo. And
did Taylor get a choice in that?
No, but Taylor's name was Roo Boy,
right.
So it was always going to fit. And the cancer was a snake. And in the book, basically, it's Dylan's life is still alive because he lives up in the sky where the snake can't get him. And every time he wants to come down to earth or something like that, I'm the dove and I go fly and get him, and he comes down. So yeah, it was something that hit, like, would tell that, he was so tolerant of everything, and everybody, that, whatever animal was there, he loved, so it was really, it was also to hit home to those qualities that you want your children to grow up having, the acceptance, the tolerance, the resilience. So that started on the education side of things. And then we had to look at, we could speak more openly to those above 13 years of age, that sort of thing. You can hit home, you can have those talks a little bit more firmer.
Yeah.
And that's where the academy got involved. So, as I speak, excuse me, the academy give the players the opportunity to be screened twice a year.
Brilliant.
They bring the doctors and the ultrasound equipment to the actual club, have me come in, talk to everybody, have the players, the first team players, because a lot of them are ambassadors for the charity.
Yeah.
So a lot of them recall Dylan's antics and recall just how strong and resilient and the wonderful thing that always resonates with me, excuse me, is, West Ham's had this academy for like 125 years or so, and they singled Dylan out for the Dylan Tombides Learning Centre, the education centre there. And I just think that's such a huge honour for the family.
There's been some big names at West Ham as well.
There's been some huge names at West Ham, and so I'm like, and the wonderful thing, I have this wonderful relationship with Karen Brady, and the two Davids when they were both here, they really loved Dylan, and they would just say, "Oh, do you mind if we name the Academy Player of the Year award after Dylan? Do you mind if we put a stone in Champions Place for Dylan? Do you mind?" It was never. I never had to. Request anything, any legacy or piece or anything like this, and so it's I'm so proud as a mum to know that. Those characteristics that you try and instill in your child were on display for everyone to see, and
that's a legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a legacy in itself, and in Australia he has a statue out there. One of the things he did in at the World Cup, he rang me just before my birthday. And said, "Mum, I've got a game tomorrow. I've written 'Happy Birthday, Mum' on my shin pad, and when I score, I'm going to pull it out and wish you a happy birthday." And I went, "Oh, I can't wait!" Right. So the next game, he did, scored, pulled out his shin pad. "Happy birthday, Mum."
I've seen the picture.
Seen the picture.
I love that.
Well, they made a statue. There's a statue in Australia.
That's incredible.
Of that iconic moment, and it's the only footballing statue in all of Australia outside of a football ground.
Wow.
And, so it's these things like this that make me realise that, people are going to remember Dylan because they're going to go, "What's DT38? What's all this? What's that statue?" And, with the internet, it's so easy to find information these days. You literally can walk past. The next thing I think I'll put on is a QR code so people can just scan the statue. And
I was just thinking about QR code. That's my head as well. Yeah.
Go straight there.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for that moment. Just like, I'm so grateful that to even receive, and you must know exactly what it's like when you get a message that says, "Thank you for raising awareness. Because of that awareness, I was able to go and get tested straight away, got an ultrasound, and they found a lump." And you'll get the everything's fine, or you get, "It was testicular cancer. I'm going in for my treatment. You saved my life."
Do you remember the first time you got a message like that? Or someone said it to you?
The one that hones in the most with me. We started doing free screenings out in Australia because it's just a lot easier to do than up here. We actually took the soccer.
So this is ultrasound screenings, just like taking them out into the.
So what happens was when we were out, we try and do a lot of work around the Socceroos when they play, and on this particular occasion, we were launching the book. The Socceroos were in town, so we took them to one of our boys' schools, the private schools out there, and one of the 15-year-old boys came home and said, "Oh, Dad, we just had Tim Cahill, and we just, they're out there, and we were talking about Dylan, this boy Dylan Tombides." Anyhow, this dad said, "My son wouldn't have known that information." He said, "I own 4 or 5 private ultrasound services, so I'm going to offer you free screenings twice a year, so that, that's how I want to work with you." So at this particular time, one of the dads that had got close with the team out there. So it's myself and Taylor and a couple of other people up here. But back home, I've got all my family, so it's like 30 strong back home. And so one of the guys went, "I've got 3 boys. I'm going to go down and find out what all this ultrasound, is like, so that I can actually walk them through it and tell them it's no big deal." He did. Turns out he had testicular cancer.
Wow.
Right? And you think, oh my God. So I had this, the story that resonates the most with me, I think, is that I was going through a transitional period. I'd always loved the job that I was doing, but I could feel myself falling out of love with it. So I decided to take a 4-month sabbatical. And while I was on sabbatical, I went to Melbourne. All my family's in Perth, so I went to Melbourne and just to have some me time and not to be pulled in any direction. And I got this message on Instagram saying, "Hi, my name is Hayden. One of my teammates has just been diagnosed with testicular cancer, and because of your awareness, he was able to get it straight on top of it straight away. Everything's great, and we want to do a fundraiser for you. Do you mind? So I said, where are you from? He said, we're in Melbourne. We're an MPL club. And I said, I just happen to be here. I just happen to be here. Yeah. I said, can I come out and meet you? So I go out and meet Hayden. I meet Danny, who was the gentleman that had, gone through. And originally he was from Perth, but I think he was up here as well, played football up here and then moved back. But I get out there, and in this team is one of Dylan's teammates from the World Cup and two of Taylor's teammates from the under-17 Joeys in Iran. And I felt like I was like home. It was just, I'm listening to the stories that they were telling me about my kids, and it was just a beautiful moment. So that's the one that probably resonates with me the most, is because and for the rest of the time I was out there, which was the remaining 4 months, I followed them every game, every home game I went there. If their away games were close enough, I would go to their away games as well. I felt like that I wanted to hear more. And and one of the Dylan's teammates, he said, you know what, Trace, I said, I have this wonderful story. Can I tell you? And I said, look, please do. And he said, with the team as we're training, you've got your first 11 and you've got your second choice. And he said, I could never push into the first 11. I was never one of those starting things. And he said, we're in training camp, and he said, Dylan come up to me after one training, and he said to me, hey, Mitch, you're training so well, so hard. I can really see the intensity you're putting in. Don't stop. People will recognise it soon, and you'll be up in that first 11 before you know it. And he's like, he didn't have to come over and say that. He's a player that everyone, looked up to. He didn't have to say it, but he did, and it made me just, go, wow. So, so hearing stories like that just make you think that, he was a good egg.
Yeah, he sounds like
a good egg.
I think the legacy of what's been created in his name is in itself amazing. But as a mother, it must be almost more rewarding just to hear those stories of like, he was a good human. That's what we aim to create, right? Like, that's testament to you and your family, and whatever you've instilled in him, like those anecdotal stuff just must mean the world to just hear that sort of stuff.
No, and I hear myself going, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. All those things that you, as your parent, you do. And, I remember him when he first went into camp. He had a teammate that, was talking to him, was training with him, and the coach pulled him aside and said to him, why are you talking to this guy? This guy's here to take your position. Why are you making friends with him? This kid burst into tears, and Dylan was eavesdropping onto the conversation, as Dylan does, and he pulled him aside afterwards. He said, come here, he's one person's opinion in this big football world, and his opinion's not always right. He said, what room are you in? He said, I'm in this room. He said, well, I'm by myself. Go get your gear. You're coming in to stay. You're going to bunk with me for the rest of the week. And it was just like, he didn't have to do that. And it just...
At such a young age as well.
Exactly. At 17 years of age. And he just endeared him to, to his teammates, because that's what he was like. He was a real leader, and he really led by example in on and off the field. And as a mum, I'm so proud that those characteristics came through.
Absolutely. I suppose where we want to go next is just, what are your next steps with DT38? Where are you at with it, and what's the change you're hoping to put out into the world?
Well, one of the things that, as a small charity that, is self-funded, we struggle financially, and, so getting that big break with that donation, or that big break with some funding I think will really make a difference. I've obviously got a foot in the door with the footballing clubs. I'm starting to branch out with other ambassadors throughout different codes and that sort of thing. But really, I want to start heading into other footballing clubs and do what we do at West Ham with the ambassadors, with the young kids, give the education book to the younger age group, the 9s through to 13s. Parents can read the back of it, and the older kids have the talk and have the screening. People come in their own community. They should be able to, with all of these clubs, they have their own medical connections. They should be, and that's my next goal. And the reason I'm wanting to focus on that is because it's not a big funding requirement. I still have to produce the resources, as you know, and you want to leave a medical set of testicles with these teams so that they're always there for the doctors to display. So that's my short-term plan. My long-term plan, I'd love a men's-only health centre. How good would it be just to know that you can come in there and you're going to get scanned within 24 hours or 48 hours from needing. That's ultimately what I would love to create. I don't know how that's going to come about. I don't know if it's something collectively as the Testicular Cancer Network gets together and does something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I just think it would be pretty awesome to empower men to go, right, here you've got scans for this, blood tests for this, all your treatment for this, counselling, grief counselling, everything that a man could need to look after his own health right under one-stop shop. Yeah.
That sounds like an amazing vision.
It's the long-term plan.
That's it, isn't it? It's all about working towards that goal.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, anything we can do to support that as a charity, would love to talk about that. But I think we're probably at the point of the podcast where I would like to ask you some quick-fire questions, if you're all right with that.
Multiple choice or?
No.
No? Okay. Damn it.
No time to think. Just dive right in.
Okay.
So number one, I think I know the answer to this. What advice would you give to someone who's worried they might have cancer?
I would say go and find out, because worrying doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever. And, a lot of the times it's not cancer. A lot of the times it is just another ailment that might mimic its symptoms or signs. Go find out.
Fantastic advice. What was the most impactful thing someone did for you after Dylan was diagnosed as you were going through that journey?
Oh, that's... I think I'm going to have to liken it back to my employers just actually saying, do not worry about this job.
Yeah.
You go worry about your son and your family. That would have to be, at the time, a lot of people have provided me with support, but this support went on for 3 years. Yeah. And when I stop and think of how often Dylan was in hospital and I was right there with him, that would have to be my two employers.
Literally invaluable, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The amount of time and memories you got to spend.
Yep.
As employers, I think giving that flexibility just is literally life-changing.
Well, absolutely. And I've endeared myself to them for like the rest of my life sort of thing.
Yes, of course.
And the memories that I've created with Dylan, because of that, like you said, are invaluable.
Amazing. What's the worst thing someone has said to you about either you being affected by cancer or your grief? I don't really... I tell you why I'm struggling to answer this question is because anybody that's spoken negative to me, I've put them out of my mind within probably 5 minutes of hearing it, right? That I will start focusing on something that is more positive. And so I really can't, I don't let those thoughts in. I really don't have an answer for that one other than whatever they've said has gone out in one ear and out the other as soon as it possibly could, and I've not even given it the time of day. I think that in itself is solid advice. What advice would you give to someone recently diagnosed with cancer?
Not having the experience with all of the cancers. I think that the same advice of being as upbeat as you possibly can, like not letting stress, form part of your day, take little steps with, right, I'm going to go do this now, and focus on small things and not, you can focus on the big picture if it's positive, but not if the big picture is negative. Keeping busy, Dylan, if he wasn't playing football, we joined a 10-pin bowling league. We're all bowling, on a Thursday night, 10-pin bowling. And it's just to get him out of the house, keep him busy, keep him active, stay active, and just be the best version of yourself while you're going through it.
And if you like it, get a little pitch part for your hospital
room.
Brilliant.
And get somebody to bring you food that's not hospital food.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for that. Lastly, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from going through this cancer experience?
I suppose the biggest lesson I've learned, and it's not so much even like it being the cancer experience, it's probably the experience in general. I've got no control over the situation, right? If Dylan's time was up, Dylan's time was up. When my time's up, my time's up. And I liken it to Taylor actually, struggling when Dylan first passed away and wanted to, take his own life. And he would go out and we kept Dylan's car for a bit. He went out in Dylan's car and I would lay there awake going, is he coming home? Why isn't he answering me? And I just went, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. And I just said, Dylan, he's your responsibility. If you want him up there, you take him. But I'm not losing another bit of sleep over this. I can't do it. And it was just realizing that you have so little control over, of everything. You can shape your path. You can shape how you want to live. You can shape your life. But at the end of the day, when your time's up, your time's up. And that was a really powerful moment for me. And so, yeah, I suppose that's what I would take. That's what I've taken out of the cancer journey, is that you don't know when your time's up, and so enjoy while you can. Just enjoy what life is, what you're doing right now. If you're not happy, do something that does make you happy.
I think that sounds like an amazing place to surmise the podcast. I just want to thank you first and foremost for being here today and telling your story, telling your experience, telling Dylan's story, because I know that cannot be easy, but you do it very eloquently. And I'm sure everyone listening and watching has taken a lot from that. You said something earlier, which was Dylan was an amazing young man with a message for the world. And I think that from what you've said could not be more true. And I think not only is it's Dylan's legacy that you're carrying on, but it's also your legacy, because you created Dylan and he put all that into the world and you're carrying that on. So I think you should be incredibly proud of that. And I am proud that the Robin Cancer Trust is going to be working more closely with you. And I think what I should have done to actually surmise is let you say where people can find you, because I haven't done that yet, and then we will end the podcast. But I just wanted to say that. So thank you for everything you do.
No, thank you. It means a lot. And I'm so proud of the way the world is remembering him. So I can't be anything but proud, can I? I can't be anything but happy. But our website is dt38.org. There's just recently been a documentary that has been produced on Dylan's life, and that can be found on the website as well. The website's there to educate us and raise awareness. You can find help for signs and symptoms. You can also find support for people that have gone through cancer and have come out the other side. There's a support network there. And it's also a place to reach out to us if you want us to come in and do an awareness session or an education session. You can contact us through the website. So, please check out dt38.org. And, if we can come and be a support network for your next community group or your workplace or your sports network, please just reach out. We'd love to come and have a chat.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Toby.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our amazing supporters and funders who make this podcast happen. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a review and follow us on social media at Thrive Against Cancer. And be sure to check out our other episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. If you want to help support our mission to give a voice to the cancer community, please contact us or visit our website to learn more at thriveagainstcancer.co.uk.